A few weeks ago, we selected 3 random players for the challenge of a lifetime to see if the average PvPer has what it takes to get Gladiator. Are you ready to find out? We took the average arena team and paired them up with coaches to see just how far they can be pushed in arena. Our coaches aren't playing with the team, but instead they're using years of experience to teach the same skills used at the professional level. So join us as we take you through this revolutionary learning experience. Welcome to the Skill-Capped Road to Glad Challenge. Last time we met with our team, they had made some incredible progress and had reached new heights, climbing to 2,300, 400 points higher from where they started. Our coaches were building our team around the 5 pillars of WoW, with offense and defense being the focus for our first sessions. But now, on week 3, our team needed to develop their positioning, which was clearly lacking so far. This would be one of the toughest challenges yet, as positioning is incredibly complicated, and very few players have truly mastered it. For any comp, not just RMP, having good positioning is valuable on defense and on offense. Defensively, it can allow you to avoid damage in CC, while offensively, it can make dealing damage and landing CC much easier. With this in mind, our coaches set off to diagnose the key mistakes our players were making with their positioning, and established a lesson plan with some basic goals in mind. Our team should focus on being in a position to do their goes when they are ready, but then avoid unnecessary damage in CC in between setups until stun DRs reset, which would include an advanced positioning concept called pre-kiting. And with our goals set for week 3, it was time to meet with the players and see what they were doing wrong. One of the things we immediately noticed in our rogue's gameplay is that he was kiting too far away in between setups. Of course, this meant he was avoiding damage, but it also meant he was putting himself in a position where he couldn't easily shadow step back into the fight. This would make it hard to set up a go on offense, or stop important casts on defense.
The bigger issue here is how far away you are from the enemy team and from your team, because you have a go ready. Like you pretty much have a go ready. DB is up. Again, chastise isn't up, but perhaps it could be reset with apotheosis. And this is just generally something I've seen in other games where you kind of spend a lot of time away from the team. And again, the goal is to do as many goes as possible. And so there's kind of like this huge period of time where you're just running away and DRs are resetting. Ideally, you would want to be in a position to start a second go, like right here. Right? DRs are completely gone.
For setup-heavy comps like RMP, your offense is also your defense. If you aren't in range to do your go, you risk getting run over by enemy attacks without being able to counter with your own. Sometimes the best way to stop damage is not by peeling, but instead by doing a coordinated offensive setup.
Against better Ret Warrior Druid teams, they're going to be really good at shutting down your kills. And so the workaround to that is to try to get as many offensive goes as you possibly can. And if you're far away, it's going to be harder for you to get that go. In a way, your goes are sort of your defense at the same time. So if you can get a go, it kind of works both aggressively and defensively. Of course, it forces trinkets from the enemy team, but if you're doing your go, that means the enemy team is CC'd. And so it's kind of like it performs this dual function. So you want to try to maximize how often you're doing that.
This concept could be carried over to virtually every comp in the game. If you're constantly running back and kiting, that means you aren't doing enough offensive work. You might not be dying, but you might not be winning either. And really quick guys, we wanted to remind you that our full-length coaching sessions are available now at skillcap.com/wow. There, you will also find positioning guides for both DPS and healers that cover all of the important concepts being taught this week by our coaches. But enough of that for now, let's get back to some gameplay and see what our mage was doing wrong. Mark was having positioning problems related to CC and was finding it impossible to land polymorph casts on healers in matchups against double melee. This is a common problem with caster DPS. Sometimes healers will just never leave the pillar, and when you add 2 disruptive melee DPS, it is almost impossible to land CC, even with the help of your team. Fortunately, there is one easy solution.
Okay, so what happens is, like, if you're gonna go like this, the shaman might just line your rogue. And then what you should do is you should try and kite away, like if you're playing defensive, right? You should try and always kite away from the shaman's pillar to the other side. So right now the shaman is at the pillar in front of you, so you should by default run backwards, because the shaman wants to purge you, he wants to do something. So he's going to come out, he's going to cross, he's going to pre-heal his teammates, and then you can CC him while he's crossing or while he's swapping pillars and stuff, and then you just keep doing that the whole time.
The enemy DPS are like a magnet for their healer. So if you want to reposition the enemy healer, You do that by repositioning the enemy melee.
If you want to pull a healer off the pillar, you have to first reposition yourself, and by doing so, you will drag the melee DPS out of range, forcing their healer to follow, sometimes putting them in the center of the arena where they don't have a pillar to LOS your CC. Which is related to the problem our priest was having. He was eating way too much CC against other mages, mostly due to poor positioning in the center of the map.
Into a comp like this, maybe you didn't have many games to do this yet, but your main job as a priest into a comp like this would be to not get CC'd. And what you're doing a lot of the game is you're putting yourself into positions where you can get easily CC'd. Like this is a position right now. Right now you're putting yourself in a position to get CC'd very easily for basically no reason.
Rocky wasn't just eating too much CC against mages, but he was frequently wasting his holy ward, using it during moments where he was already on poly DR. This would give the enemy team plenty of time to dispel it when it wasn't even needed.
You have to be in the line for them to take the holy ward off, dispel it, right? So if you go like peek at the pillar and just do instant spells while you have holy ward up, it kind of delays the go. And if they do get it at some point, then you can be ready with greater fade. I mean, you have the weak aura now, so whenever you see holy ward fades, you can just be ready with the fade.
As any healer, it is your responsibility to avoid CC on your own. Classes like mages have a threat zone you need to respect. You should only push in for CC when it matters, making sure to use your other avoidance tools to prevent important casts when you're in the open. Rocky was eating way too much CC and wasn't using his avoidance tools properly, two problems that could be fixed with better positioning. Our coaches ended their session with some homework. Each player would have to review some role-specific positioning concepts, including kiting, which is fundamental to a comp like RMP. And when their work was finally done, it was time to see if our team had what it takes to push 100 more points to 2,400. After their coaching session, our team was ready to push the final 100 rating to 2,400 to start their 50-win journey to Gladiator. If you remember from before, Arrow was spending way too long out of the fight, which meant he was constantly out of range to shadow step the enemy team when a go was ready. And this meant his goes were happening much slower than they could be, causing his team to fall behind. But now, Arrow was staying much closer to the action when kiting, which meant being in shadow step range to important targets at all times, allowing his team to do setups on demand, and giving them more opportunities to burn through CDs and even score kills. This concept easily carries over to other melee DPS. There are definitely times where you will need to kite away and pillar, like when the enemy team is popping cooldowns or when your healer is CC'd. But you have to think about reversing pressure at some point, which means being in range to push in to do your own setup, giving your team an opportunity to burn through enemy CDs. And speaking of kiting, our mage was able to see improvements using map movement to bait healers into positions where they could be CC'd. Before our coaching session, Mark was finding it difficult to land CC on healers who were pillaring all game, but now he was starting to cross the map and kite away from the enemy pillar. This would force the opposing healer to cross the arena, putting themselves in a position where they could easily be CC'd. And with this small adjustment, Mark was able to land setups against teams that had multiple disruptive tools. This is another concept that carries over to virtually every class in the game. If you want to reposition the enemy healer, it starts by repositioning the enemy DPS, because they are like magnets for their healers. So by kiting away from the enemy pillar, you force DPS out of range of their healer, causing them to move into the center of the map, making them vulnerable to CC or swaps. And on the topic of healers, our priest was starting to become more aware of his positioning and how he can avoid CC with LOS. In his earlier games, Rocky was standing in the center of the map, giving the enemy team a CC chain for free. To fix this, we first had him change his UI so he was only showing enemy nameplates. You can see here that he had all nameplates enabled, which made it hard to track enemy positioning. He changed to display enemy plates only, which would give him more focus for avoiding CC. And by doing so, he was able to actually see where the enemy casters were located, which in turn would allow him to avoid CC by pillaring with Holy Ward in between setups. By having more awareness in the game and simplifying his positioning, Rocky was able to start using his avoidance tools more consistently, even Holy Warding traps against some players you might recognize. Rocky was also starting to understand his role as a healer. Even though he had important offensive spells to help his team win the game, it didn't mean he had to be playing offense forever. As any healer, you need to prioritize keeping your team as active as possible, which sometimes means pushing in when your CC or damage is needed, and then immediately pulling away and avoiding CC to keep your team alive until the next time you can play offensive. Our players took week 3 of coaching seriously, and with their final Q session of the week, they saw the biggest gains yet, climbing to a final rating just over 2,400. After climbing to a peak MMR over 2600, our team began to see some losses, but for all of our players, this was their first time ever over 2.4k in 3v3. For many players, this was a milestone, but for our team who were queuing at rival rating 3 weeks prior, this was an incredible achievement. With the third pillar lit for the week, our team still had more work to be done. If they wanted to get their 50 wins for the Gladiator achievement, they needed to clear up their communication, which was by far their biggest pain point at this point in time. Gladiator was in range, and we would have to wait until next week to see our team's final push. Alright guys, thanks for tuning into another episode of the Road to Gladiator series. Let us know in the comments below what you thought of our team's improvement this week. And while you're at it, let us know if you would like to participate in another season of Road to Gladiator. And just as a reminder, all of the coaching sessions from this video are available now on our website, skillcap.com/wow. Even if you don't play RMP, we have over 600 PvP guides designed by some of the best players in the world that teach you how to start playing like a gladiator. As always though, thanks for watching. See you soon.